Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Young, and we're going to be talking about section 8.7a, covering the magic X. The magic X is our tool that we use to factor quadratic trinomials. This is anytime we've got numbers written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, okay? Anytime we're trying to factor anything set up like that, we're going to use this magic X. It's a way for us to kind of organize our thoughts and keep the process in order for us. Now, let's take, for an example, 3x squared plus 10x minus 8, okay? Pretty straightforward quadratic trinomial here. And what we need to do first is identify what a, b, and c are, right? Understanding how we're actually going to use this, standard form quadratic to work it into the magic X. So a, the number in front of the x squared, that's going to be 3. B would be 10, and C would be the negative 8. Okay, make sure you don't forget that negative sign. That's really important. Okay. Now, to start using the magic X, then there's two big things we really want to focus on to start off with, and the first is the top of the X. All right, we multiply A times C, put that in the top of the X. A times C. So in this case, it would be 3 times negative 8. But for here, I'll just write the A times C because it's really important we remember that that's where that goes. A times C goes in the top of the X, and then B, that's the middle term, that goes in the bottom of the X. And then what we're going to do is we're going to list all the factors of A times C, and then there's one pair that's going to multiply to get to A times C, but then add to get to B. And that's what it is that we're looking for. And we'll put those on the side of the X and do some more stuff with those. So instead of walking through each of these steps without an example, let's come down here to this one that's kind of empty and ready for us. And I'll rewrite that 3x squared plus 10x minus 8 so we can see it. And we'll actually do the factoring here for this one down on this X. So we said our first step was to take A, which is 3, and C, which is negative 8, multiply them. 3 times negative 8 comes out to negative 24. Okay, and that negative sign is going to be really important. Okay, so factors of negative 24 that add up to B is what we're ultimately going to be looking for, and B is 10. Okay, so you just heard me say that phrase, factors of A times C that add up to B. That's like the meat of what it means to factor a quadratic trinomial, is finding factors of A times C that add up to B. So we need to figure out what those factors of A times C are. A times C is negative 24. And so what I usually have students do is just list out the factors. But instead of making you guys kind of memorize them, we do give you this sheet. And this is our factor sheet. And what it does is it lists all the numbers 1 to 100. And with each number, list all the factors of that number. So if we said, say we came down to 24, we have all the factor pairs that multiply to 24. So 1 times 24 is 24, 2 times 12, 24, 3 times 8, 4 times 6, so on. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna list these all out, okay? And 1, 24, 2, 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6, okay? Now, looking at this, some of you might notice that none of these actually multiply to get to negative 24, because if it's going to be negative 24, one of these is going to have to be negative, right? Negative times a positive equals a negative. So to try and figure out, okay, well, is the smaller number on the left going to be the negative number, or the bigger number on the right going to be the negative number? We have another little trick for that, also coincidentally an X. And for the sake of these notes, we'll write these kind of down here. If, say, we have our magic X, and the top number is positive, which is not the case here, and the bottom number B is also positive, well, if I need factors of a positive that add up to a positive, then the two factors I'm gonna pick for the sides of the X are also gonna be positive. That doesn't match this case, so we'll kind of keep going. Now, let's say we've got a positive number up top, A times C is positive, but B on the bottom is negative. Well, in order for it to multiply to a positive number but get to a negative number, both of these numbers also have to be negative. So we would need two negative factors here. Where it gets tricky is like in our case, where a times c is negative, okay? And in this case, b is positive again. Well, in order for that to happen, we will have to have one positive number and one negative number. But again, the question was, do I use these bigger numbers on the right or the smaller numbers on the left? Let me see if I can shift that up so you can kind of see it, okay? And what we find out is if we have a negative a times c, but a positive b, then we want to use the positive number and have that be the bigger one, and the negative number be the smaller one, okay? And while we're at it, just to be thorough, if we have a negative a times c and a negative b, well, now we'll still have a positive and a negative, but I'm going to switch the order around because now we'll want the bigger number to be negative and the smaller number to be positive, okay? That's a good tip. If you need a second, this would be a good time to probably pause it and make sure you have that chart down. So that's a nice little quick reference to have when you're doing these problems. Now, back up here, we've got our a times c again was negative 24, and our b was 10, okay? So now we're looking at all the factors, and we decided that when we have a negative up top and a positive on the bottom, we want the big number to be positive and the small number to be negative. So let's go through and make all these negative, okay? And now we start looking at them and we try and see which ones add to b. So negative 1 plus 24 is 23. That's not going to work. Negative 2 plus 12 is 10, which means that's going to work. Now, if we wanted to be thorough, we could check. Negative 3 and 8 is 5. Negative 4 and 6 is 2. So we know these ones won't work. And so that leaves us with 12 and negative 2. And I always like to check. 12 times negative 2 is negative 24. 12 plus negative 2 is positive 10. So what we've done is we've now found the factor pair that we're looking for. If you're looking at the steps above, this would be step number 4 we just completed. Step 5 then tells us to divide these outside factors here and here by the leading coefficient a, okay? And this is really important. This is one of the steps people always forget about. But we have to take whatever this a value is and divide each of these by 3, okay? That's a really important step. And then once we do that, we simplify it, okay? So 12 divided by 3 is 4, and negative 2 divided by 3 is just negative 2/3, okay? So we end up with these two as the factors that we want to use. And then once we've done the simplification, then we write the factors into parentheses, okay? So you guys remember when we were doing FOIL and the distributive property, we would always write our factors in parentheses. Well, here we're going to take x plus 4 because that's our factor, right? So it's just x plus whatever shows up here times x minus 2/3. And why is it minus here but plus here? Well, it's always plus, but plus a negative number, it's negative 2, it becomes subtraction, okay? Now, we have one more thing that we have to do, and that's whenever we have these a fraction in our factor, we can't leave it like that. So the way I look at it is the denominator has to move up to the front, and so our final answer becomes x plus 4, that one doesn't have to change, but then this one becomes 3x minus 2, okay? And all that gets us to our final factored answer. Now, of course, what you should always do you should always check your answer. And the way we check our answer when we're factoring is we do the opposite. Opposite of factoring is distributing. And so if I were to distribute this, okay, if I took x plus 4 times 3x minus 2, and I distribute, x times 3x is 3x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. 4 times 3x is 12x. Hey, negative 2, 12. Sounds familiar? Sounds familiar. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. And then we combine our like terms in the middle, just like we were doing in section 8.3, and we end up with 3x squared plus 10x minus 8, which is exactly what we started with, which means our factoring was right, okay? All right, that is Factor with the Magic X. That's not enough examples to master it, but you can watch this in more detail, and you can click over to the next video where I will do 3 more examples before you totally let loose in the homework. Good luck, guys. Thank you.